Hello, it's Bob Wells here, and welcome back to another episode of the Undercurrent Stories podcast, where we dive deep into the hidden depths of our world, one fascinating guest at a time. Today we have a really special guest with us, an international athlete. He competed in the 1968 and 1972 Summer Olympics in the Discus and won bronze and silver medals in successive Commonwealth Games from 1970 to 1974. He was the British national discus champion on 7 occasions and held the British record for 25 years. Since then, he has become a leading sports administrator, academic and author. And so I'm delighted to welcome a true titan of British athletics, Bill Tancred. Hello and welcome to Undercurrent Stories, Bill.
Oh, thank you very much. Good morning to you, Bob. I'm delighted to be on your programme.
It's great to have you on. And we were talking before the episode got recorded that I've finished your book, Bill Tancred, An Ordinary Olympian, but what a life. And I have to say, it's a real true inspiration, some of the stuff that you've done in your life. Well, all of the stuff you've done in your life, from a former soldier, competitive sportsman, your academic career. It just shows. And I think I'd probably like to sort of start off by saying that and this could well have been at the beginning of your book. And it's an Einstein quote that you quote. There are 2 ways to live your life. One is as though nothing is a miracle, and the other is as though everything is a miracle.
Yeah, very true. Well, I was brought up by a father who was very passionate about sport, and what sport meant to a person. And his case, being the eldest son, he sort of instilled into me all about never giving up, always trying your best. And if you try your best, that's all you can do, And I think I've always learned that in my lifetime. So, for example, academically, when I failed my 11 plus, which was a horror to my parents, maybe I blame my parents, particularly my father, because he's the one saying concentrate on sport and not education. So I couldn't win either ways. But I did pick that up later on in my life when people said you can't do it. I proved to people that you can do with hard work, with support. I think you can achieve many things in life.
And it was interesting that you had 2 brothers. We have 2 brothers, and they were both in sport, but successful as well.
Yeah, we were known, I suppose, in the small county of Suffolk at the time, particularly in throwing events. We were known as the throwing family. And Peter, my younger brother, he followed into my footsteps and represented Great Britain in the 1976 Olympics. Jeff, my other brother, who was not so tall or wide, he took up the hammer and he became a junior international. And so I just think it's through my father that he said that if you can do all these events, become an athlete. So we all tried all the events. I mean, I started off being a javelin thrower and competing in the All Englands, and I was a medalist or 3rd place in the 3A's juniors. And so everyone thought I was going to be a javelin star until I got injured and javelin elbow. And I thought that was the end of my athletics career. But my father said, oh, try the discus, because I think you've got talent of throwing. So I said, okay, I'll have a go at it. And of course, like you work hard at it, you train hard, all these things. And then I became a successful discus thrower. So again, trying something which people said you couldn't do, because I wasn't really big and large and strong. So I had to then do all the various things to become big and strong, weight training, conditioning, and whatever. So again, that was a transformation from being a failure in javelin throwing and thinking that's the end of your career. And then you become a discus thrower and become successful at it.
And what was it about your father that made him so interested in sport to start with?
He was a talented in his own. We were brought up actually in British India. And Dad was a very promising athlete, and he tried very, very hard to make the 1948 Olympics, in the decathlon. So I think he always told me that he preferred me to become like a decathlete because you can run, jump, and throw. And that's the foundation of being a real good athlete. And there was no such thing as failure. So we did a lot of planning when we were young for success. So we looked at, this is before periodization, this is before all the science came into sport, into athletics. So we looked at the event and we used to have 1 year cycles. So we had short-term goals, how we then planned our training accordingly. And if I had some blips, which I did have some blips, how do I overcome that? How do I become better? So I learned that at a very, very young age, in 11s and 12s. I think concentrating on that, so I failed my 11 plus when I look back, because I didn't spend too much time academically at the time. He was very inspirational, I would say, and I think that's very good. And his glass was always half full. There's always things that you could do. But if you didn't obey him, then there were some consequences, the hard school. Again, if he wanted to train, say, at 6 o'clock in the evening, I had to be ready in my tracksuit, all prepared, at 5 to 6. If I was later, he would curse me.
So there was a bit of fear involved as well.
Yes, I think so. Yeah. But I began to realise that's how he was as a man. So I accepted it later on.
What did your friends say to you? The whole family sort of in sport like you were and training hard. What sort of reaction did you get from your friends?
I think they were pleasantly surprised that after the war in the early 1950s, when we came to England, that you had a father. First of all, he was alive, because a lot of my friends lost their fathers in the Second World War. And so Dad used to train them as well, and they loved it. He was better than any PE teacher, because he knew all the basics of throwing, the basics of running, the basics of conditioning. And he had a book called, by Tony Nett, a German author, who wrote about conditioning, one book, one on muscle training, which was weight training, and the other one was on sort of conditioning. And that could still be used today if people looked at it, because they were so advanced in the 1960s. And that was a book I used as a so-called, inverted commas, a Bible for sports development, sports conditioning. So he was ahead of the game, really, my dad, in that respect. So, very, very inspirational guy. And I didn't think at the time, and I tell a lovely story, when I broke a British record, and I broke 19, on one occasion at the White City, which was then the home of British athletics, the press came up to my father and said, "Are you proud of Bill breaking the British record?" He paused for a bit and said, "No." And they were shocked. Why was that? Because he said he could do better. And that's the caliber of the man.
Yeah. When did you first realise that you had something special in terms of, I could really go somewhere now?
I didn't really. Well, I played at school. Again, my father taught me to be a good all-rounder, and not just in athletics. So I could play football. I was a very good cricketer. I think had it not been for my father, I would have taken up cricket, because I was a fast bowler. Right. I was very accurate. I could throw things. I can bat well. I had a good eye. I could things up. So I knew at a young age that I was my results for the school report was always A+ for PE in games. And all the teams that were picked, they got to have Bill Tancred in the team. So I knew I was a very popular figure because of the sporting prowess at that age.
Yes. It must make you very popular with your friends and really help develop your social skills, I guess.
Well, sport is a wonderful thing, isn't it? You do create and not say to produce, but you have lots of good friendships, okay, which even today, if I see people who are still alive, I might dare say it, always think, well, remember the teams? They talk about it now. Do you remember that team when we beat that school? Do you remember when we scored 3 goals here? Do you remember the athletics, Bill? We smashed them, and they were people who were, I wouldn't say privileged, but they had the advantage of good coaching. And our schools probably at the time didn't have that. So, very, very good. And it's a long-term friendship, and sport's wonderful in that respect.
Yeah. Just moving on to sort of, as you developed your career, you became sort of national champion. That then stepped towards Commonwealth and Olympics. How did that feel?
Well, first of all, it's the 1964 was my first GB so-called cap. We used to get international vests. That's the first time I represented my country at Great Britain level. Well, what an honour, because you get the Union Jack and you get the athletics written on there, and you think, I'm one of the best in the country in my event. And you do feel very good of it. And I think my parents were proud, my friends were proud, and it's a greatest honour to represent your country. And I'm talking that today, we didn't get paid for it, but it was just that personal pride that all your hard work of trying to achieve success, you've finally made it. But once you have a bite, you suddenly look at other countries and you want to beat the other countries. And all of a sudden, you raise your bar or raise your game. And then I wanted to be the best, not only in Britain, but the Commonwealth. I thought, well, here's a chance of beating the Canadians, a chance to beat the Australians who are very anti-British in sport. And I wanted to beat them as well. So I thought, well, I'm now going to train on a 4-year cycle and see whether I could do well. The first time I was picked in Jamaica, and it was a chance to travel. I mean, I'm talking all these lovely places, Jamaica, Christchurch, New Zealand, all these wonderful, Mexico, Munich. It had a chance to travel, meet people from different walks of life. I met people from public schools. I met people in the forces. I met people who were like coal miners, but we were in the team. So it gave you that team cohesion of trying to be the best, the country the best. So that's what really, when you represent your country. And then to get a medal, well, I got the bronze medal in 1970 in Edinburgh. I was very happy with that because I was unexpected to get a medal, but I got it. But when it came to 74 at Christchurch, New Zealand, I was the so-called favourite. But because the event was in January, it wasn't our season. And I think looking back, had it been in the summer, I would have probably won, but I got the silver medal. But I was disappointed in getting a silver medal. And I always say, well, if it was the summer, I might have won, blah, 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 but I didn't do it. But it was an honour to say I was a medalist. But when it came to the Olympic Games, that to me was the icing on the cake. Because everyone in sport desires to become an Olympian. And once Olympian, always Olympian. And I got told of my autobiography. I used the word an ordinary Olympian. And a lot of my friends criticized me in a friendly manner, said, you were no ordinary Olympian, Bill. You were a good Olympian, so, but that was the title to capture the imagination of the public. So, that's how I built myself up.
Yeah. And I guess we haven't really discussed the influence the army had on your career and discipline, and because you did quite a lot for sport in the army, didn't you?
I was in the 1st East Anglian Regiment, which was infantry, and I don't think that helped me immensely because I was just beginning to have a little bit of success when I was posted to Aden. Okay. And Aden wasn't the best place for a training environment. So you had to train in the middle of the night because it was the coolest part of the day. There was just sand and whatever. So it wasn't the best one. And I actually did quite well I'm winning the Middle East Land Forces Championships. And everyone said, there's a star here. We'll send them home. And I had to get what they call an indulgence flight. It took me 7 days hitchhiking to come home on an aeroplane. Anyone with senior rank would take my place. And I was left in places like Khartoum, El Adam, Malta. So when I came for the trials, I didn't do as well as I should have done. I only missed it by a metre, but had I thought, had I been at home, I might have qualified for 1964. But that failure made me more keener to say I'll be better prepared. And fortunately, I was then transferred to what is now the Royal Army Physical Training Corps. And I had a posting to the Royal Military Academy, Sandhurst, where they had better facilities, they had officer cadets, and they had a real desire and interest in sport. So I had, for the first time, weight training facilities. We had the Oak Park athletics track, so I had concrete circles. Not all of it was plain sailing because as much as they loved sport, in my time, I had to do guard duties. I'd been selected for the 68 Olympics, but I still had to do guard duties. And I remember asking the powers to be, could I be relaxed for this? And I'll catch up when I get back from Mexico. And I had to go and see the general or someone at a very high command who said, I'm sorry, you're a soldier first, athlete second. And I left. I purchased my discharge to go to Loughborough University. But when I left, it was a shock to the British Army in athletics because there was another famous athlete, Chris Akabuzi, and they didn't want to lose him. So he was on full-time training. So I did him a good service. So I had peaks and troughs, if you like. But the Army did, particularly the Army PT Corps, set me up also on my academic studies. So my hat's off to them. And Bob, 3 things shaped my life. I look at my life, now I'm 83. One is education, the other is sport, and the other one is military. And what a lovely life I've had. And they're the 3 things that helped me.
Yeah. Well, reading the book, as I said before, it's an inspiration of all the different things that you did in your, or you've got in your and still do in your colourful life. There's one particular bit in the book where you talk about the 1972 Olympics,
the massacre.
And I remember as a sort of teenager, we'd watch it on the news, and it must have been a terrible time. You were in the middle of all that, weren't you?
Yeah, it's very unfortunate. I mean, had you been prior to the Palestinian September the 5th Munich terrorist attack, I could take a number of friends into the village. And because of the consequences of that, then security tightened up. And I remember vividly on September the 5th, having breakfast when they said a couple of blocks away, the Palestinians have murdered 2 Israeli coaches. Okay, and we didn't believe it. Said this is nonsense. Until we all went outside, we saw a lot of movement on the verandas. The Palestinian dressed up in the hooded balaclava type, and we thought, God, this is real. And there was lots of people anxious, if I would use the word. And over the course of the day, helicopters coming into the village itself to take the hostages, the terrorists, out of the Olympic Village. And we heard later on there was a massacre, and I think 9 more Israelis were killed, 5 Palestinian terrorists, and 1 policeman. So a number of deaths. And we all thought at the time the Olympic flame has finished. We thought that was the end of the Olympic Games. And Brundage, the IOC president, had a day when it was mourning, if you like, memorial services, and they decided the following day the Games will go on. Several athletes, including myself, we didn't finish the closing ceremony. We came home and said, well, if that's sport, it's now a dangerous thing. And since then, security has tightened up. And also Mark Spitz, I think he won 7 gold medals, the swimmer. Okay, because he's a Jew, he was ushered out of the Olympic Village because they thought that was a threat as well. So it's frightening to say that.
Yeah, I bet.
But there were still some outstanding performances. Mary Peters, who won a gold medal by the sheer closeness of everything. And look what she's done in women's sport. So there were a lot of great events and stories that were happen, but it'll always be remembered. It's supposed to be the friendly games, but look, it was the terrorist thing in 1972. So I always remember that.
Yeah, I remember seeing it on the news. And then what inspired your sort of transition from an elite athlete to your academic career, Bill?
Very interesting. As I said right at the beginning, Bob, I was always told you've got into education late because I'd failed my 11 plus. And I used to look at people who were in positions of not power, but of responsibility. They either had to have a degree and whatever. And I'll tell you a lovely little story that made me really keen. When I finished Loughborough, I did a teacher's diploma course because I'd been in the military. So I did 2 years as a matured student at the great Loughborough College, which is now Loughborough University. And my first job was at Ipswich Tower Rampart School, which is now closed down completely. And when I went into the staff room, I was told, here comes Muscle Man, the discus thrower. It's a compliment, but I didn't have a degree. And I used to look at the people who were heads of department and whatever, and I noticed they had a BA, BSc, and I thought, well, do you know what? I'd like to study and do that. So I started to work at it and whatever. And as you know yourself, I put the same amount of effort into my academic studies to think, well, I can achieve a lot of things, but I never wanted to be just known as the discus thrower. So I wanted to
No.
balance my academic work. So once you do a bachelor's, the next stage, as you say, you climb the ladder like Commonwealth medal. I thought a master's degree. And then I thought there's no one ever got like a PhD in sports science, sports leadership in 1978. And I was so fortunate to get a grant, which enabled me to leave my poor wife and 3 young kiddies to go to America to study for my doctorate, which took 3 years. And I used to come home each semester. And all the people in the Faculty of Physical Activity and Sports Science said, geez, this guy is so determined. But I used the same determination that I use in athletics into my academic studies. And I think I'm so fortunate that I fell back on that because there was no money in it, not like today. But I was never in the poor position like poor Ricky Hatton, that didn't really have a career to really fall back. And I think people who had a career when they finished stood them in great stead for their life. And I think that's the driving force to try to emulate the standards I had in athletics, but also in academic studies. To finish up as a professor of sports and exercise science, I thought, that's it. I've done it. But it's hard work, and anyone can do it. If I can do it, and if I had some disadvantages, well, everyone can overcome it. So I hope I've inspired young people to get to the top as well in both areas.
Hi, it's Bob here, just a quick interlude. Hope you're enjoying this episode, and if you would like to hear more interesting interviews, we have over 150 episodes to date with many fascinating guests talking about a wide variety of topics which include music, history, philosophy, fitness, food and drink, adventure, contemporary culture, and many, many more. I'm sure there's something that you'd really enjoy. So all you need to do is just visit undercurrentstories.com or search Undercurrent Stories in any of the podcast platforms. And now back to the show. That's very inspirational when you say anybody can do it. And I know exactly where you're coming from, because you've clearly had that hunger and desire from a very young age to outperform and do the best you possibly can with things. But, there's a lot of people who may think, well, I'm quite happy where I am. I'm not that hungry for it. How can they become hungrier to become more successful if they don't feel that they are? Bill, I know it's probably quite a hard question, but Have you been asked that before? What are your thoughts on that?
That's a very good question. I think it's that I'm probably ambitious. I didn't think I was, but I think I'm ambitious. And I think having a family you're the role model for your family. And in my case, I've got 3 daughters. And I thought, well, I'd like to be inspirational to them, because they would probably not have a father like I had who drove them. Because they were girls, I was more softer in sort of helping and supporting them. And they've said to me as I got older, Dad, you're wonderful. You've done all these things, but I didn't have a very good start. So I noticed now with their children, they were telling the importance of education, the importance of sport. So for the other people as well, it depends. What do you want to achieve in life? I wanted to achieve these things which have helped me in my life. But I was always told people, don't be put off. You need the support. I go around to lots of things and talk. I was a patron to a number of charities. And I give them talks about you can achieve this and that if you have that support. If you have a little desire, a little bit of a goal, dreams are there. Achieve your dreams, okay? And I think that's the way I've looked at it. And the trouble is, once you get to the top, there are people to try and knock you down. Don't let them knock you down. You just play the game accordingly. And in the end, your results will prove to be very successful in your life and your lifestyle. Same with health, isn't it? People say, I take health for granted, okay? But I've talked to so many people who in later age have said, do you know what? I'm really glad I joined that walking group. Did you know I'm so glad I did this, because it helped me to be healthy in old age. And I think it's the same thing with me in my life. I think, well, that's the way I should go. And I'm glad I did. Lifestyle. And that was my choice.
It's interesting. Yeah, well, it's interesting. I've interviewed quite a few musicians, and I'm a musician myself. And there's this thing, isn't there, about for whatever you do, you need 10,000 hours. And I've spoken to drummers and that, and some of those successful drummers and guitarists, they still practice for 2-3 hours a day.
Yeah.
Okay, they might come off it if they're off tour, but they'll build it up again, and it's just sheer hard work and determination, isn't it?
I train every day, even though, but I'm nowhere like the athlete I was. I mean, I don't even lift the weights like I used to. You know, I've appreciate the aging process. I just go into my little garage, which has been converted after COVID, and I got my little exercise bike. I've got my little light machines, and I work out every day.
And do you do some weights?
Yeah,
Bill?
very light weights. Yeah,
because I mean, there's this big thing at the moment. Well, it's obviously you know yourself would have known it a long time, but this thing about if you want to grow old physically and still have be strong, it's all about strength because you lose muscle mass as you get older.
You lose, I think it's like 10% your muscle mass every decade or something, and I could tell myself. So you've got to keep your legs strong. Particularly ladies, well, even fellas really, is that, once your legs go, your balance is affected. So I followed the late Michael Mosley, who was not such an inspirational figure. Cleaning your teeth on one right leg, cleaning your teeth on your left leg.
Yes, balance,
So balance is crucial. I do work on that. I notice it's the aging for me as well. So I work out on my muscles, on my leg work. I do my arms, like getting out of a bath, all these things. I think you've got to do your cardio-respiratory work for your heart and lungs. So I got the exercise bike, a bit of puffing as well. And the other thing, Bob, is once you've had the shower, after you've had your workout, you feel great. You've got so much energy still. So,
do you have a cold shower?
Oh, no, that's one thing I haven't done. No. No, that's one thing
I've tried it, but I'm a bit of a chicken. I last about 9 or 10 seconds and then run out.
Well, you're brave for 9-10 seconds more than me. No, that's one thing I don't do. Funny enough, I live in Felixstowe and I walk on the prom and I see it's so popular, people swimming. And they've said,
"Oh, really?
Me, Bill," but I haven't joined them yet. One day I said I might do it, but not yet.
Yeah. I was in Felixstowe a few years ago, and there's is the waterfront, and there was a good vibe there. The waterfront with lots of cafes and pubs and all sorts going. Is that still thriving after COVID?
You're not talking about Ipswich, right? Yeah, they're still there. Yes, it's still there. Yeah. It's a nice, lovely way to walk. I used to work at the University of Suffolk when I retired. I came out of retirement to help the sports development section there, or the department.
Yeah.
And what a lovely way to come to work. You walk by the waterfront with all the boats as well. Wonderful. Yeah. Puts you up for the day, doesn't it?
Yeah. So when you got into the academic side of sport, this was the time, I guess, when it was widely recognised that the UK wasn't really at the forefront of supporting athletes in the way that some of the other countries like the US were. And it was the first time we started hearing about sports science. So I guess you must have been at the forefront of all that.
I would think I was one of the first groups, I would say one of the pioneers, if you like, of using the word sports science. And as I went to America to learn about sports science, and I came back. But very interestingly, I think it was when I had a Winston Churchill Fellowship in 1989 to 90, my project title was called Integrated Sports Science Partnership between doctors, trainers, coaches, sports scientists, and practitioners of sport. And I got that. I was very fortunate to get this award, which enabled me to go to Australia to look at the Australian Sports Institute. I also went to Melbourne, I think it was Sydney, picking up their brains of what made the Australians at the time the super athletes, and super women and whatever. They were world dominant at the time. And also my part two, to go to America. So I went to Oregon University, and I also went to the Colorado Olympic Training Academy. Again, seeing what the Americans did to help their athletes. When I came back, my report was to set up a British Institute of Sport. And I wrote that and sent it to the Minister of Sport, but I didn't get any feedback from them. 5 years later, one of their ministers went and did exactly the same, and they set up the Institute of Sport in Sheffield, where I was working. So I thought, hello, it's all my work here, but I didn't receive any recognition, which was disappointing. I only happened to say I went to a Churchill meeting a few days back, and I said that was my biggest regret, that I didn't ask the then Minister of Sport, what does he think about my project, which was a formidable report, but it was all trying to help British sportsmen and women. That was in 1990, Bob, and I'm talking about sports science. Today, I knew Lord Coe. We had the most successful games, 212, okay? And we then became the showground, if you like, for global dominance of sport. So those fruits of labour, sports science, as you know, is the ones that gave us the best foundation to be the success that we hold today. Interesting.
Marvellous. Yeah, well, the other thing that I'm personally interested in is the actual sort of end game in terms of competitions. When I say that, I mean, when you look at it in terms of achievement, if you look at the 4-minute mile that Roger Bannister did, I mean, everybody thought for a while that was you couldn't do any better. And you had the record on the discus for 25. Was it 64 metres? Something
64.96, just short of 65 metres in 19.
And what is the British and world record now for it?
Well, the British record now, they use the wind. They're professional. It's gone up to 70 metres now. It's good, but I still think I'm in the top 10 all-time list for a discus thrower and the world record again, because they can use the wind now. I did, but they've had these gusts now, and they've had these meetings where a lot of them are thrown so much better. But they're professional athletes now, so they do it full time. As I said, I had my studies to do, my family to do, and at the time, I was the best that Britain had. So I tried to do my best. But you often think when you retire, you look back in your life, and in sport, I think if only I had sports psychology training and advice, I might have been a better person in terms of competing in competition at the highest level. For example, how do you sort of control your anxiety, because you do get nervous. And sometimes I've thrown further in training and warm-up than I did in competition. How do you control that? Do you arouse yourself a bit too much and then you flummox? Or are you under-aroused? There's that balance. So the applied science is crucial today. If you look at all the top performers in all the sports, they have a wonderful setup, nutritionists, sports psychologists, blah, 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 and they do it. But they use all the sports science to increase and maintain performance at the highest level. So that's where it's moved. And the other thing is facilities now are wonderful. I used to throw off a road, my poor old late father, using chalk for an 8-foot, 2.5 diameter circle, throwing into a field that had grass of 3 foot tall. And all the workers used to come and watch me, used to say, "You beat those Russians, Bill. You beat the Americans." But I didn't have their facilities. I didn't have their sports scholarships in America. So these are the hardships that people have in that time, the amateurs. So again, sports science moved up another level. And performances today are just wonderful, aren't they? I mean, it's sport. But you notice how there's subtle difference between coming first and second. But the consequences is huge if you come second.
Yes.
That's the difference, but it's so close. In the 72 Olympics, if I can remember, I think the shot put was the gold and silver, I think it was 1 centimetre. In the javelin, it was 2 centimetres. And then people used to say to me, "Why do you train so hard?" Because I wanted to get that improvement. And that's the difference. It's very competitive now. We've had the recent World Athletic Championships. Well, we didn't get a gold medal in athletics. We had a bad luck. People were injured, whatever. But that shows you it's globally very, very hard now to get a medal. And my hat's off to all the ones who are medalists. We've done well in women's rugby, wonderful, football, the Lionesses. But they're all trained, they're professionals. They want to be number one.
Yeah, and there's all the nutrition now, isn't there? The knowledge about nutrition.
Exactly. Are you eating too badly? Are you not eating the right proteins, etc.? Are you eating too much? Less? Yeah. I mean, I happened to go down to Christchurch University in Canterbury, and I saw their facilities, and I thought, as a student, learning all about rehabilitation, learning about sports science, sports nutrition, they have it there now. None in my time. Loughborough with the Mecca, but other institutions are doing well. One of the issues I think how it could probably improve is really, when I look back, is what happens to the ones who are not sponsored, the ones perhaps haven't got the education, that career after sport destinations. I think that's a thing they should really look after. And probably helping women to become strength and conditioning coaches. There's not enough of them. So they're the little things I think, from my experience, might help British sports people.
Are you still involved in any consultancy roles by some of these bodies at all?
None whatsoever. One of the sad parts, I think, they don't ask you. There's a new breed that comes in, okay, and you're finished, okay? But I still think there's many talented people who can offer advice and help using their previous experiences to help young people reach and achieve their dreams. So,
but I guess you're still, like I say, this is an example. This podcast is an example of me talking to somebody who's inspirational, and there'll be people listening to this, and I hope they are, that it means something too. And you've just come back from a Norwegian cruise where you were doing some speaking.
Yes.
So I guess you're still giving back to society in that way, aren't you?
Oh yes, I mean, I talk on a number of cruises now as a guest speaker. And the subjects that I talk about, and they're very well attended, is aging youthfully. And it's aimed at older people who I want them to retain their independence before they go into a care home. So I tell them all about the tips, a bit like an inspirational, the late Dr. Mike Mosley. So I preach everyone can do it. It's a lifetime choice. I tell them all the tips to be healthy for the rest of their lives. And the other one, I talk about the experiences of my Olympic Games, and above all the lovely personalities I've met, and where are they today? And I tell them where they are today, and they're fascinated by it. And then I recently went right off the subject, and because I'm very keen on military history, I wrote a book which was published just recently called British and USA Film Stars Who Served in the Second World War. And they were the stars of, like, Jimmy Stewart, Audie Murphy. These people were actors, but they did the real deal. They actually fought. And, and I've read that. It was a fascinating read. And
so this book came out recently, did it?
Yes, you can get it on Amazon and whatever, but I did self-published. And it's a lovely book of all the famous film stars, British film stars, who learned their trade in the forces and then became film stars. So again, they had in their own lifetime that little desire. Well, I thought, I'd like to be an actor. So that's what they did. So I talk about that. I talk about, this is a good one, I talk about all the Olympic champions I've met in my lifetime. I knew them, or I've heard of them, and I can tell little stories about them. I talk about how they got that gold medal, their drive, their discipline, wanting to be the best. So I try to do that in an inspirational way, and I think it goes down well with the audience. I've only
I guess when you're I wouldn't say at the top, but when you're getting to the top, in other words, you're in the environment of the Commonwealth Games, maybe just before the Olympic Games, etc. You're mixing and doing international stuff. You're mixing with a group of people who they are almost at the top of their game, or the top of their. So you're actually learning quite a lot from them.
Yeah, I think you do, because well, first of all, if you're in my area, you look at the techniques. When I was young, I used to look at my technique and then say the guy's thrown further or the lady's thrown further. What is it that I haven't got? And we didn't have all the biomechanics now, these three-dimensional studies. It was really an eye to watch. And I didn't even have the phone to just do videos of them. But I used to pick ideas. Then we used to go in the weight training room, look at some of the exercise they did. And then when you get to know the coaches, I used to ask things about the sports psychology. How is it that they were never, for example, I'll give you an example, Olympic champion, it was Al Erter. He won 4 separate gold medals at 4 separate Olympic Games. And I asked him, how is it that you were never the world record holder, but on the day you became Olympic champion? So he asked me, Bill, what do you think about at night, just before your competition? Well, I'm probably like a lot of people, waking up thinking, I see the Union Jack flying, I'm throwing my best, blah, blah, blah. And he said, no, I don't think like that. I said, what do you think about? And he started to talk about what they do now, visualization. I look at the technique.
Oh, yeah.
Secondly, there's a competitor who suddenly unleashes a throw that breaks the world record. How do I respond to that? Or the wind directions change, or it's starting to rain. Have I brought the correct shoes? How do I adjust my technique? So the first time I started to learn from these people about the power of psychology, okay? And you do learn, and that's the way you improve. Cyclists, for example, had that squirrel club, didn't they? They looked at how good Britain were. They looked at all the other teams, what they were trying to do. Was there some little small factor, what is it that can help them to become better? So you're looking all the time to improve your performance. And that's why world records and championships are broken. Fascinating.
It is. Have you thought about doing a YouTube channel for people over, say, 65 who could do with advice on exercises at all? And the reason I say that is I know a lot of people, and I do it myself. I do some kettlebell workouts every other day. And the guy's probably in his early 30s, mid 30s, American guy, and he's very good. And there are a few that do it for senior people, but I think you'd be really good at doing that. Have you thought about doing that?
I've never thought about it, but if you knew the contacts, I'm quite happy because I like to help other people. Because in my area, people help me and spend time. I like to go and help the community. I like to help people to improve. And
we can talk offline about that, Bill.
Okay.
Because I think. What you do, you were saying about that exercise you do in the mornings and everything. I think that's quite motivational and would help quite a few people. So let's talk offline about that.
Okay.
How do you think? I know we've been talking about how athletics has improved and sport in general in terms of the way we deal with it now in the country. But what about people who go to university? How do you think universities could sort of serve their athletes better, up-and-coming athletes better?
Well, there's certain institutions I think they do a fantastic job because they offer sports scholarships. So they copy the American scheme, if you like, where you can have your studies and your training jointly to get your degree. Some universities can still do that, but I actually think, looking at some of the universities I've been to, the facilities are excellent or much better. But I think they need coaching, and I think they need better coaching. People who understand the mechanics of the event, the mechanics of the sport, the psychology, so the coaching could be much better. And perhaps also giving them competition, a little bit better, looking at the competition opportunities, not only just for the elite, but look at the second team or the third team, because someone in that second and third team over time, as a late developer, could then become your number one or the better team. So opportunities for all. So looking back, I think the coaching could be improved. Of course, nutrition, all these things. But I think the competition for the others as well to help.
That's great. Are there any sort of British athletes you're particularly excited about that are coming up through the ranks?
Well, yeah, I mean, we've got a number who probably didn't get the gold medal. I still rate Keely Hodgkinson, as our Olympics. She's Olympic champion. You got a few of them, Josh. You got some young ones coming through, and I just think we're quite strong. We're quite strong, although it was not so good at the World Athletic Championships. Again, if they can overcome injuries, okay, and have the support and they peak at the right time, then we'll have success and continue to have success. And it's a very exciting time to be, where Britain now is doing exceptionally well, or England's doing exceptionally, Scotland, whatever. We're doing very, very well. But you've got to keep that momentum going. You've got to keep the funding going because there are other nations now picking us up as well and wanting to beat us because that's the right. When you're at the top, everyone wants to knock you down.
Well, this has been a fantastic conversation. It's been so interesting to hear about your sporting career, especially your achievements and your life after competing. A truly inspirational journey. My guest today has been Bill Tancred, former international athlete, sports administrator and academic. Thank you for coming on the show, Bill.
Well, thank you very much, Bob. It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much indeed.